The infinite primordial space is extremely mysterious. It is not arranged like layers stacked one above another, but resembles a complex multi-dimensional spider web. Because of this structure, the land of origin is hidden within a certain time-space and cannot be located by other forces. Luo Feng uses the mysteries of shadow power contained in the blood crane territory to travel through the shadow power space layer. Even with this method, he must travel continuously for 55 days before arriving at the Abyss of Destruction. The Abyss of Destruction is hidden deep within time and space. World-level primordials cannot easily perceive it, while Ancestor-level existences can sense and enter it. Its layers extend deeper and deeper, and even the Starlight Lord cannot determine where its bottommost layer lies. Luo Feng considers the Abyss of Destruction the most powerful mysterious land. Its immovability and oppressive force are even stronger than those of the Land of Eternity, making the Blood Crane territory seem far inferior. Luo Feng enters the first layer of the Destruction World, which is occupied by Ba Wei Yu, an ancestor ranked among the top 30 existences in the endless primordial space. Ba Wei Yu has brought 9 world-level primordial lifeforms here to experience the power of destruction and hopefully make breakthroughs toward the ancestor level. The Ba Wei clan currently has only 2 ancestors, so Ba Wei Yu hopes the 9 descendants can become stronger. He arranges for world envoys to fight them, allowing them to experience the power of destruction without being killed. Ba Wei Yu then senses Luo Feng forcibly entering the first layer. Although Luo Feng is extremely powerful, Ba Wei Yu is not afraid because ancestors possess terrifying life forces and numerous methods of survival. In the infinite primordial space, a true one-on-one kill between ancestor-level or cultivator-lord-level existences has never occurred. Even during the previous war, several powerful existences had to cooperate with Yuan and Starlight, using suppression, restrictions, energy supply, and forbidden techniques to kill ancestors. Ba Wei Yu, ranked among the top 30 and not belonging to any major camp, is confident in his ability to survive. The so-called weaker forces of the infinite primordial space are only weak compared with the 3 major camps. In reality, they are still extremely powerful and possess their own methods of survival. Ba Wei Yu asks whether Luo Feng wants to claim the first layer and offers to yield it, knowing that he cannot stop Luo Feng from forcibly refining it. Luo Feng refuses and instead asks Ba Wei Yu to summon all the world envoys to besiege him so that he can experience and study the power of the destruction world. Ba Wei Yu agrees and mobilizes 3,000 world envoys. Each world envoy is undying and immortal, and together they completely surround Luo Feng. The 9 world-level primordials are shocked by Luo Feng's status and by Ba Wei Yu's respectful attitude toward him. Under the siege of the 3,000 world envoys, Luo Feng stands like an immovable mountain. Attacks come from every direction, yet his blood-colored robe and powerful body withstand them. His casual counterattacks can destroy several world envoys at once, and even his sky-splitting saber can obliterate them. However, the world envoys soon condense and reappear, because they are immortal carriers of the power concentrated within the destruction world. Individually, each world envoy contains only an incomplete portion of the power of destruction, but 3,000 of them working together can unleash terrifying power. Their combined attacks reveal a form of highest-level destruction power known as the power of breaking, or the power of split, whose fundamental characteristic is causing all things to fracture. The world envoys use many unpredictable methods, attacking Luo Feng from outside and even appearing inside his body. Luo Feng deliberately retracts his protective robe and allows his physical body to directly experience the attacks so that he can study the destructive mysteries through the wounds they cause. He discovers that every layer of the Abyss of Destruction contains a different form of highest-level destruction power, and even the weapons nurtured within it contain their own destructive mysteries. Some attacks represent the cutting apart of all things, while others cause life itself to naturally split apart before the attack even directly touches the body. Luo Feng realizes that the different forms of destruction power are primarily based on destruction, while also incorporating other mysteries such as life, matter, infinity, fire, and space. Each form contains at least more than 80% of the mysteries of destruction. The power of breaking specifically consists of roughly 80% destruction and 20% life. Because Luo Feng has already developed an embryonic foundation in the primordial blade path, he believes that mastering this form of power will be possible with sufficient comprehension and will greatly assist his understanding of the primordial blade path. Creating an entirely new Dao is extremely difficult. But mastering a corresponding form of highest level power is easier. Powers of different origins can also provide greater assistance than multiple powers from the same source. As shown by the Starlight Lord's combination of space and time, Luo Feng's own pursuit focuses on the relationship between life and destruction. Therefore, while enduring the siege of the 3,000 immortal world envoys, he begins carefully studying and comprehending the mysteries of the power of breaking. Luo Feng remained on the first layer of the abyss of destruction for more than one epoch. During this period, the 3,000 world envoys continuously launched attacks, allowing Luo Feng to observe and study the partial power of destruction they invoked. After thoroughly comprehending the powers of all the 3,000 world envoys, Luo Feng realized that there was no longer any meaning in remaining there. He thanked Ba Wei Yu for his assistance and announced that he was ready to proceed to the next layer of the destruction world. Ba Wei Yu immediately dismissed the world envoys, while Luo Feng broke through the spatial obstruction and headed toward the second layer. Ba Wei Yu was completely relieved because he had been worried that Luo Feng might suddenly turn against them and forcibly seize the first layer. The 9 world-level primordials were also looking forward to Luo Feng's departure. As they had been unable to use the world envoys for cultivation during the entire epoch and had not dared to cause trouble for fear of provoking Luo Feng. After Luo Feng left, Ba Wei Yu arranged for World Envoy to continue accompanying the 9 clansmen in their cultivation. On the second layer of the Abyss of Destruction, Luo Feng encountered the master of that layer, the primal beast Ancestor, one of the 9 emperors of the innate primordial camp. The primal beast Ancestor was the strongest existence in the domain of the endless primordial space, with its entire body itself constituting a domain. However, it specialized in domain abilities and was relatively weak in other aspects. In direct combat, it was much weaker than Wulin and had only managed to occupy the second layer of the destruction world with great difficulty. Because the primal beast Ancestor had personally experienced the terrifying destructive power of Luo Feng's origin Great Destruction, it remained highly vigilant toward him. Although the primal beast Ancestor, the Black Tide Ancestor, and the giant god Emperor were collectively invincible, the primal beast Ancestor was weaker than any cultivator lord in a one-on-one battle. Luo Feng explained that he had no intention of seizing the second layer and asked the primal beast Ancestor to send all the world envoys of the layer to attack him with full force. Although the primal beast Ancestor remained cautious, it agreed. With a thought, it summoned 1,800 black-haired world envoys. These fierce and powerful envoys surrounded Luo Feng and launched a full-scale assault. Luo Feng's red robe fluttered violently as he endured their attacks and carefully comprehended the power of destruction contained within them. He quickly determined that the destructive power of the second layer could be called the power of shattering, consisting of approximately 80% destruction and 20% matter. This power was not suitable for Luo Feng to personally master, but it still contained profound mysteries of destruction that he could comprehend. Luo Feng fought against the world envoys while deliberately allowing their attacks to strike his physical body so that he could study the destructive principles more deeply. During the battle, after Luo Feng casually killed an envoy with a saber strike, an invisible ripple appeared, and a gray weapon descended from a hidden space. Luo Feng immediately reached out and seized it, discovering that it was a gray spear with extremely powerful destructive force. This was the first destruction weapon he had obtained in the Abyss of Destruction. According to the information he had gathered, explorers could occasionally discover destruction weapons while destroying one destruction world after another. The previous 7 lords had obtained some of these weapons, with the least obtaining 5 or 6 and the Starlight Lord acquiring more than 20. However, these destruction weapons were generally not particularly suitable for the lords, so most of them were stored in the land of origin for later cultivators to exchange for. During the desperate period of previous wars, the lords had temporarily opened exchange permissions, giving Luo Feng, who had not yet broken out of the cage, the opportunity to obtain the sky-splitting saber. At that time, many treasures were made available, including several that were as precious as the sky-splitting saber. Luo Feng determined that the gray spear would provide him with little assistance and put it away. Although the spear was comparable to the sky-splitting saber in terms of level, Luo Feng personally preferred using blade techniques. At this level, Weapons such as the sky-splitting saber were merely ordinary weapons for ancestors and lords and could only provide a limited increase in combat strength. Treasures capable of significantly enhancing the strength of cultivator lords were extraordinarily precious. Luo Feng also understood from the intelligence that the Land of Destruction contains certain special opportunities capable of producing extremely valuable treasures. For example, Kafu's white battle armor had been obtained from the Abyss of Destruction. Jin had repeatedly risked his life to explore the Abyss of Destruction and had even wanted Luo Feng's assistance in entering it, hoping to obtain an extremely powerful weapon or battle armor through one of its special opportunities. On his own, Jin's exploration range was limited, but with Luo Feng's assistance, many layers of the destruction world would no longer be able to stop them. Although refining the shadow of origin required relying entirely on one's own strength, ordinary exploration could naturally be carried out through cooperation. According to the experience summarized by the other lords, the deeper one traveled into the Abyss of Destruction, the greater the chance of encountering special opportunities. No rumors of such opportunities had appeared within the first 10 layers, although it was possible that some discoverers had kept their discoveries secret. Beyond the 10th layer, however, special opportunities occasionally appeared. A long time ago, Kafu had encountered one during an exploration of the 19th layer. After enduring immense hardships, he finally obtained the white battle armor, which accompanied him for endless ages. That battle armor greatly enhanced his defense against various external attacks, providing benefits comparable to those gained from refining and mastering a mysterious land. Rumor has it that beyond the 20th layer of the infinite primordial space, there are even more unique opportunities. However, only 4 beings have ever occupied layers beyond the 20th. Infinite Snake Ancestor occupied the 21st layer. Demon Ruins occupied the 22nd layer. Starlight Lord occupied the 26th layer. And Sha Zhou occupied the 27th layer. Yuan currently occupies the 19th layer. But this does not necessarily mean he is weaker than Infinite Snake Ancestor or Demon Ruins. Occupying a layer of the Abyss of Destruction gives the first occupier a major advantage. If Yuan wants to occupy the 21st layer, he must face the joint blockade of Infinite Snake Ancestor and numerous world envoys whose strength is nearly comparable to his. Luo Feng continued battling the surrounding black-haired world envoys at a steady pace, using the siege to familiarize himself with the highest-level destructive power known as the power of shattering. From a distance, the master of the destruction world, Primordial Beast Ancestor, watched with envy. It understood that every cultivator lord had mastered a primordial Tao, whereas it relied more heavily on its innate talent as an ancestor. Although it had grown to an extremely powerful level and possessed unmatched domain abilities within the infinite primordial space, it still could not achieve the state of being undying and undying. Its physical body itself was its domain, making its domain incredibly powerful. But this also restricted its further advancement. Primordial Beast Ancestor realized that in order to become undying and undying, it had to break free from the limitations of its physical body and completely integrate its domain into the infinite primordial space. Once that happened, it would become part of the infinite primordial space itself and achieve the undying and undying state. However, as long as it possessed a tangible physical body, there was always the possibility of being destroyed. Previously, after experiencing Luo Feng's origin Great Destruction, Primordial Beast Ancestor had immediately removed itself from the destructive force. Yet both it and Black Tide Ancestor still lost approximately 10% of their physical bodies. If Primordial Beast Ancestor had attempted to completely block that terrifying power, it might have been completely annihilated. Therefore, it did not act foolishly. It yearned for the undying and undying state, but had still been unable to take that final step. After more than one epoch passed, Luo Feng told Primordial Beast Ancestor that there was no need to continue sending world envoys to besiege him because he was ready to move to the next layer. Primordial Beast Ancestor then asked Luo Feng how its void body could completely integrate into the infinite primordial space. Luo Feng explained that before attempting to integrate with the infinite primordial space, Primordial Beast Ancestor first needed to understand it sufficiently. He advised it to carefully comprehend the infinite primordial space. If comprehending the primordial space Tao was impossible, then it should at least attempt to comprehend one highest-level spatial power. Primordial Beast Ancestor immediately abandoned the idea of comprehending the primordial space Tao. recognizing that such a path was beyond what an ancestor like itself could realistically pursue. But even comprehending a new highest-level power remained extraordinarily difficult. It nevertheless thanked Luo Feng for his guidance. After which Luo Feng smiled and moved on to the next layer. Among the lords of the cultivator camp, the innate primordial camp received different treatment depending on its faction. The main battle faction was deeply hostile toward the cultivator camp, while the cultivator camp was much friendlier toward the anti-battle faction. Among the 9 emperors, Giant God Emperor, Black-Tide Ancestor, and Primordial Beast Ancestor were the leaders of the anti-battle faction. Previously, when more than 70 ancestors were unable to retreat smoothly and the entire innate primordial camp was in danger of suffering a major defeat, these 3 had joined forces. The cultivator camp maintained friendly relations with the 3 leaders of the anti-battle faction in hopes of reducing the number of members in the main battle faction. Although the lords themselves were not greatly affected by the battles, many world groups suffered extremely heavy casualties. Luo Feng secretly lamented that mastering a highest-level power was truly difficult. In the past, starting from his mastery of the primordial life and death Tao, he had comprehended blood power, which took him more than 3 epochs. This time, his primordial blade path was still only in its infancy, and comprehending the power of breaking was noticeably more difficult. Nevertheless, it was still easier than comprehending a complete primordial blade path. Despite Luo Feng's extraordinary potential, comprehension ability, and accumulated understanding of the Tao, comprehending even a single highest-level power was already extremely difficult for him. Most ancestors generally grew through their life course, and their innate talents usually allowed them to naturally master one highest-level power. However, mastering a second highest-level power caused the difficulty to rise dramatically. For example, within the Giant God Emperor clan, no one had been able to refine and control the Giant God realm. Within the Infinite Great Snake clan, only Infinite Snake Ancestor had completely mastered 2 highest-level powers, while the other Ancestor-level Infinite Great Serpents were significantly weaker. Luo Feng then continued staying in each destruction world for 1 or 2 eras, familiarizing himself with the highest-level destructive power contained within each layer. In the 5th layer of the destruction world, he encountered Lotus Prison Mountain Master. Lotus Prison Mountain Master was hostile toward every cultivator lord and was therefore deeply hostile toward Luo Feng as well. Refusing to cooperate with him, Luo Feng could only take action and clearly declare his intention to forcibly occupy the 5th layer of the destruction world. Although Lotus Prison Mountain Master was highly skilled at resisting attacks, its ability in direct confrontation was inferior to Luo Feng's. Otherwise, it would not have occupied only the 5th layer. Under Luo Feng's forceful stance, Lotus Prison Mountain Master was forced to fight with all its strength and cooperate with 800 world envoys to launch a joint siege. The battle erupted beneath the dim sky and across the dark earth. Luo Feng continued fighting for more than 1 epoch, thoroughly researching the power of the 800 world envoys before finally proceeding to the 6th layer of the destruction world. Lotus Prison Mountain Master felt deeply dissatisfied by the domineering behavior of the cultivator lords. But it was powerless to stop Luo Feng. When Luo Feng finally arrived at the 7th layer of the Abyss of Destruction, Wulan's booming laughter resounded throughout the entire world. Wulan had noticed that Luo Feng had stayed for 1 or 2 eras in each layer of the destruction world and asked whether he was comprehending the powers of destruction. The other lords also understood that after Luo Feng had used the power-breaking technique, he would certainly attempt to comprehend a second primordial Tao. They believed that, considering Luo Feng's speed in mastering the power-breaking technique, comprehending his second primordial Tao should not take too long. Luo Feng explained that he had encountered a bottleneck in comprehending his second Tao. So he had come to the Abyss of Destruction to accumulate more experience and foundation. Wulan immediately offered to help. Luo Feng then asked Wulan to mobilize all the world envoys in the 7th layer to besiege him. Wulan agreed and, with a single thought, mobilized 600 world envoys. These world envoys were shaped like molten lava beasts and were extremely fierce. Their siege allowed Luo Feng to encounter a new destructive power known as Violent Power. Violent Power consisted of 8 parts Destruction Path and 2 parts Fire Path. Luo Feng experienced and studied it for more than 1 epoch before asking Wulan to withdraw the world envoys. Luo Feng then told Wulan that he needed to remain in this layer of the destruction world for some time. Wulin readily agreed, explaining that his avatar normally slept anyway. Luo Feng transformed the surrounding land and soon created a simple cave mansion. Wulin said that he would not disturb Luo Feng and then slowly sank his massive body into the depths of the earth, entering a state of slumber and only awakening when outsiders arrived, having experienced 7 different powers of destruction and pondered all of their mysteries. Luo Feng began secluded cultivation inside the cave mansion, intending to thoroughly digest and absorb these insights and make them an integrated part of his own path. Luo Feng, dressed in a black robe and blood-colored cloak, sat cross-legged in the destruction world, but his aura had undergone a fundamental transformation. In the past, his aura had been heavier than a source world, and his defensive capability was so powerful that even dozens of ancestors would have struggled to destroy his body. However, the ancestors feared powerful killing abilities more than defense. Luo Feng's previous destructive method, Origin Great Destruction, relied on self-explosion supported by enormous energy reserves. Although it made all sides wary, the ancestors had already witnessed it and could prepare against it. Luo Feng realized that his primordial life and death Dao was primarily centered on life. Although it contained some destructive methods, it still had an essential gap compared with the highest level power. The power of breaking, however, was a true highest level destructive power, although it had deficiencies compared with the primordial blade path he pursued. It fundamentally transformed Luo Feng's destructive abilities. His techniques now contained profound mysteries of destruction. By itself, the power of breaking was somewhat inferior to the powers of Jin, Minghuang, and Moman. But when combined with Luo Feng's primordial life and death Dao, the result was completely different. Luo Feng's life form was nearly 100 times stronger than Jin and Moman, meaning that even an ordinary burst of his energy could rival the power released when they burned their main combat avatars. With such terrifying energy control combined with the power of breaking, Luo Feng was uncertain of his exact current strength. Generally, an ancestor who mastered 2 highest level powers could rival a lord. While a sufficiently perfect combination, the blessing of a mysterious land, or special opportunities could allow some to surpass ordinary lords. The Ice Mountain Ancestor, Infinite Snake Ancestor, Kafu, and Demon Ruins were examples of such existences. Luo Feng believed that the Infinite Snake Ancestors possessed 2 different highest level powers, while he possessed a primordial level Dao and a highest level power. So he should be stronger than them and capable of surpassing nearly all other opponents. However, he was still uncertain about Starlight and Sha Zhou. After mastering the power of breaking, Luo Feng understood that his greatest obstacle to creating a complete primordial blade path was his inner self. A lord's strongest path generally aligned most closely with their true heart. But Luo Feng could not accept the destructive philosophy contained in Jin's legacy, which sought to destroy everything purely for the sake of strength. Therefore, to create a primordial blade path centered on destruction, his inner self had to align more deeply with destruction. His heart had become like a blade capable of cutting through all obstacles after endless honing through countless eras. Yet this was only barely sufficient for him to comprehend the highest level power of breaking and remained far from enough to comprehend a complete primordial blade path. Luo Feng realized that his greatest flaw was his inner self. Only when the heart and Dao were in harmony could one truly create a Dao. Therefore, he decided to continue accumulating and preparing thoroughly in every aspect, as he had always done in his cultivation. After his breakthrough, the cave mansion dissolved and its energy returned to the destruction world. Luo Feng then told Wulin that he would continue exploring the next layer. Wulin sensed the fluctuations caused by Luo Feng's breakthrough and believed he had gained some cultivation insight. But he did not realize that Luo Feng had created a second primordial level Dao. Such an event would be extremely significant not only for Luo Feng but for the entire cultivator camp and would need to be reported to the other lords. The Abyss of Destruction was regarded as a holy land by many ancestors throughout the infinite primordial space. Possessing a seat in the Land of Eternity represented the highest level of survival ability, while occupying a layer in the Abyss of Destruction represented a combat ranking within the top 30. Even famous existences such as the Lotus Prison Mountain Master and the Primordial Beast Emperor occupied only the top 5 layers. These 2 holy lands represented survival ability and combat ability respectively. Luo Feng then entered the 8th layer of the Abyss of Destruction. The layer was shrouded in mist. and a towering black figure covered in black scale armor emerged from the ground. A solitary eye burned with blood-red flames. This was Wugu Ancestor, one of the top 5 among the 12 undying and undying existences of the Ice Peak camp. Wugu asked whether Luo Feng had come to seize his destruction world. Luo Feng explained that he had continuously explored the abyss from the first layer, spending several eras on each layer to hone his cultivation, and had no intention of seizing the 8th layer. He only asked Wugu to arrange all the world envoys to besiege him for 1 or 2 eras so that he could use the battles to aid his cultivation. Wugu immediately refused. The cultivator lords had seized his territory more than once, and Wugu still resented the events surrounding the Ice Peak camp's invasion of the cultivator territory. He had been the most aggressive participant and had even stationed his true body in the occupied territory. But after the Ice Peak camp decided to return the territory and its gains, he had been forced to give everything back. Wugu was deeply dissatisfied with this humiliation. He told Luo Feng to leave and continue to the next layer. When Luo Feng declared that he could only force Wugu to cooperate, Wugu laughed coldly and claimed that if he did not wish to cooperate, Luo Feng could not even touch a single world envoy. Wugu then activated the power of the 8th layer destruction world. Vast dark clouds rolled across the sky and instantly engulfed Luo Feng. The additional power of the world of this layer could either enhance Wugu himself or be condensed into world envoys. Since the power of destruction was not Wugu's specialty, condensing it into world envoys was the best way to maximize his combat strength. Wugu possessed combat strength close to the average lord level. Although his direct fighting ability was slightly weaker, his domain abilities were extremely powerful. His life core could merge into his power and appear in any avatar, allowing that avatar to become his true body. With the continuous supply of destruction world power, his strength rapidly reached its peak, becoming 3 times stronger than his normal true body. The boundless dark clouds then crushed toward Luo Feng, attempting to force him out of the 8th layer. However, a cold blade light suddenly flashed. It instantly pierced through the layers of dark clouds and struck Wugu Ancestor's body, causing him to feel as if his body had been forcibly split apart. The blade light, wrapped around Luo Feng's figure, continued directly toward the core of the destruction world, the shadow of origin. Wugu Ancestor was shocked by Luo Feng's speed, which was now far beyond his own. The power of the destruction world enhancing Wugu rapidly dissipated and transformed into as many as 550 world envoys. Wugu immediately ordered them to stop Luo Feng, believing that if they could delay him, he would have time to join forces with them. The world envoys desperately attempted to block Luo Feng, but his blade light was too sharp and swift. With a single slash, it cut more than 300 world envoys in half. Almost unhindered, Luo Feng reached the shadow of origin. Before Wugu Ancestor could catch up, he suddenly felt that he had lost control of the 8th layer destruction world. Luo Feng then appeared on the surface, his blood-red cloak fluttering as he coldly declared that Wugu was no longer needed and should leave. Wugu Ancestor was completely shocked and unable to understand what had happened. Even with the enhancement of the world's power, he had been unable to intercept Luo Feng for even an instant. Luo Feng had never displayed such terrifying strength during the previous battles between the 2 camps, leaving Wugu Ancestor unable to believe the tremendous transformation in his power. Luo Feng coldly asked the Wugu Ancestor whether he still intended to continue fighting. As a being comparable to the Cultivator Lord and an extremely insightful ancestor, Wugu Ancestor clearly understood the significance of what had just happened. His domain and physical body had been effortlessly severed, while more than 300 world envoys had been cut down by a single strike. Realizing the terrifying level of Luo Feng's strength, he admitted that he had never expected the Cultivator camp to first produce Starlight Lord and then another powerhouse like Lord Luo Feng. He then coldly snorted and immediately plunged into the spacetime passage toward a higher layer of the abyss of destruction. Afterward, a manifestation of the Wugu Ancestor arrived in the territory of the Ice Peak camp and went to see the Ice Peak Ancestor. The Ice Peak Ancestor appeared as a towering mountain of deep blue ice, radiating an endless chill so powerful that weaker primordials and even high-level primordials could not survive in the surrounding area. Among the top powerhouses of the Ice Peak camp were Sha Zhou, Ice Mountain, and Pu Cheng. Although Pu Cheng Ancestor was one of the 12 Undying and Undying, he was extremely disobedient. Wugu Ancestor, despite being somewhat greedy, was much more obedient, so the Ice Peak Ancestor valued him more. Wugu Ancestor solemnly reported that he had encountered Luo Feng in the Abyss of Destruction. He had fought with all his strength. Yet Luo Feng had severed his physical body with a single strike and taken control of the 8th layer destruction world from him. The Ice Peak Ancestor was shocked and immediately declared that such a result was impossible. Wugu Ancestor explained that he himself would not have believed it before the battle. He then displayed the entire previous confrontation in the air. Because battles frequently occurred throughout the Abyss of Destruction, the various factions could not constantly monitor every location. The confrontation between Wugu Ancestor and Luo Feng had happened too quickly. So no other powerhouse had noticed it. Wugu Ancestor also explained that no other powerhouse had been paying attention to the destruction world on that layer at the time of their battle. Meaning that the confrontation remained a secret for the moment. Even attempts to observe the past generally could not reveal a battle at this level. Although certain supreme beings could observe past battles involving ancestors and lords, only a very small number of existences throughout the entire endless primordial space possessed such an ability. Observing the future was even more difficult. The past was already fixed, but the future contained countless possibilities. Different future timelines could diverge in countless ways, making it much more difficult to determine what would happen. After watching the entire battle, the Ice Peak Ancestor was forced to acknowledge Luo Feng's terrifying destructive power. Although Wugu Ancestor's physical body was not exceptionally strong, it was still considered upper medium among the ancestors, and his domain was also powerful. Furthermore, he had been strengthened by the power of the destruction world. Yet even with all these advantages, he had been unable to block a single attack from Luo Feng. The Ice Peak Ancestor concluded that Luo Feng's destructive power had already surpassed the level of Moman, Jin, and Ming Huang from the cultivator camp. Wugu Ancestor agreed, having previously fought with those powerhouses over control of the destruction worlds. Luo Feng's strength did not come merely from the power of breaking, which by itself was inferior to the methods of Jin, Moman, and the others. However, Luo Feng combined the primordial life and death Dao with the power of breaking. As a result, some of his killing moves could instantly unleash 1/10 of his energy reserve. This was far more powerful than the energy Jin, Moman, and Ming Huang could release by burning their main battle avatars. Therefore, Luo Feng's blade could naturally sever Wugu Ancestor's physical body with ease. The Ice Peak Ancestor further judged that even though Yuan was extremely powerful, his greatest expertise lay in formations, so he could not achieve the same kind of destructive power as Luo Feng. Luo Feng's destructive might directly targeted the level of Starlight Lord and Sha Zhou, placing him among the highest tier of powerhouses in the infinite primordial space. This realization put the Ice Peak Ancestor in a bad mood. The cultivator camp, which had once relied on the Ice Peak camp, had already become increasingly independent and disobedient. Now that Luo Feng had grown even stronger, the cultivator camp would become even more dominant. Wugu Ancestor asked how the Ice Peak camp should respond. The Ice Peak Ancestor felt increasingly exhausted by the situation. The Infinite Ancestor had only recently broken through and become an undying existence comparable to himself. At the same time, the innate primordial camp was already the strongest faction and possessed an even greater advantage after the breakthrough. Now, Luo Feng, the rising star of the cultivator camp, was rapidly approaching the level of Starlight Lord and Sha Zhou. As the leader of the Ice Peak camp, the Ice Peak Ancestor felt tremendous pressure. Within his own faction, Pu Cheng Ancestor was disobedient, while the three monarchs of Fenglei were constantly causing trouble. However, the Ice Peak Ancestor decided that the Ice Peak camp should not rush to confront the cultivator camp. The greatest conflict with the cultivator camp was actually between the cultivator camp and the innate primordial camp. The innate primordial camp possessed half of all the ancestors in the endless primordial space, and its enormous hunger for resources and desire for source world origin made it destined to become the cultivator camp's mortal enemy. Therefore, the Ice Peak Ancestor intended to let the two sides fight first. The more fiercely they fought, the deeper their hatred would become, and the more difficult reconciliation would be. Wugu Ancestor agreed with this strategy. The Ice Peak camp possessed far fewer ancestors than the innate primordial camp, which had nearly half of all the ancestors in the endless primordial space. The Ice Peak Ancestor sighed that Luo Feng had only been a lord for a relatively short period of time. Yet he had already reached such a terrifying level. The Ice Peak camp had not produced a powerhouse of comparable potential for a very long time. Wugu Ancestor also felt that Luo Feng's growth was frightening. Luo Feng was already directly challenging powerhouses like Starlight Lord and Sha Zhou, and his future potential was even more terrifying. The Ice Peak Ancestor increasingly felt that the Cultivator camp might eventually surpass the Ice Peak camp, while the Ice Peak camp seemed to have no effective way to stop it, leaving him with a strong sense of powerlessness. Meanwhile, on the 8th layer of the Abyss of Destruction, Luo Feng quickly left his mark on the Shadow of Origin. After Wugu Ancestor departed, Luo Feng began carefully studying it. The Shadow of Origin was completely different from the ordinary origin of a mysterious land. It was far more illusory and ethereal. Luo Feng gradually sensed that the reason the ancestors and lords called it the Shadow of Origin was because it seemed to depend on the entire Abyss of Destruction for its existence.